Welcome, my friends, to our evening conversations and readings in English literature. I have with me here Sri Aurobindo on Shakespeare by one K D Sethna, whom, if you should be acclimatized in the high altitudes of English literature, a contemporary and a good friend of Bertrand Russel, would like to first present his start of his comparison of Sri Aurobindo, or rather critique of Shakespeare in the Aurobindonian angle. Sri Aurobindo's spiritual philosophical height is now universally acknowledged. His stature as either poet or literary critic is still insufficiently seen, but the few who have plunged sensitively into his prolific poetry with a mind trained on all the elevations of English verse have been moved to speak of his more than 50,000 lines of lyric, narrative, drama, and epic in the same breath with the work of the greatest. In this year of quartercentenary of Shakespeare's birth, such a comparison may lead to the shocked rising of many eyebrows, but surely the age of badolatry is gone, and when one reads the opening quatrain of a sonnet by Sri Aurobindo in the Shakespearean form, I made an assignation with the night. In the abyss was fixed our rendezvous. In my breast carrying God's deathless light, I came her's dark and dangerous heart to. The vibrant glory of the inspiration, I still want to imagine Shakespeare turned yogi and sonneteering about some cosmic dark lady of his, some mystery of the depths at once terrifying and fascinating, whose human reflex he had once loved and hated. For I have sworn thee fair, and thought thee bright, who art as black as hell, as dark as night. Again take Shakespeare suffering pangs of absence from the beautiful youth he addresses as Lord of my love. How heavy do I journey on the way, what freezings have I felt, what dark days seen. Then stir within to the thought of devouring time, and barren rage of death's eternal cold. I repeat, and barren rage of death's eternal cold. And to the challenge, yet do thy worst old time, despite thy wrong, my love shall in my verse ever live young. As well as to the assurance to the object of his devotion, your name from hence immortal life shall have. Now, might we not fancy that Shakespeare, completely spiritualized and running the hazards of the integral yoga to transmute hours of dross into terms divine, is bearing with some hope of the inmost heart the absence of his fair friend, whom he calls a god in love. When Sri Aurobindo closes his own sonnet, I walk by the chill wave through the dull slime, and still that weary journeying knows no end. Lost is the lustrous Godhead beyond time. There comes no voice of the celestial friend, and yet I know my footprints' track shall be a pathway towards immortality. However, K D Sethna continues, we are not celebrating here the 92nd birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo the poet, So I shall resist the quotableness of his poetry and ask to be forgiven for only a few more lapses. The very first of them is prompted by an echo of the last word, immortality, of the quotation already made, and by the fact that now it is Shakespeare himself Sri Aurobindo is speaking of. It is from another sonnet on the Shakespearean model, a dream of surreal science. He is mocking the scientific vagary that all the poetry or spirituality or conquering dynamism of man, the dreamer and doer, is merely a matter of the body's chemistry. Sri Aurobindo begins, referring to both Shakespeare and Homer. One dreamed and saw a gland write Hamlet, drink at the mermaid, capture immortality, a comedy of hormones on the Aegean's brink, composed the Iliad and the Odyssey. Well, comedy of hormones and a gland writing Hamlet. We look forward to that. If we are disposed to be ingenious, we may aver that essential Shakespeare can all be treated in brief under the three aspects hit off by Sri Aurobindo in his 2 lines on him here. The writing of Hamlet would stand for Shakespeare's finest and most far-reaching self-expression, the profound cry of the heart's rosy blood grown strange and baffled by reflection of the brain's grey cells. The drinking at the mermaid would represent the poetic frenzy arising from intoxication with the life force, from a constant touch on the founts of a vitality stimulated at the same time by what is human, what is elemental, and what is mythic, the half woman and half fish, and their harmonious whole fantasy, which the sign of the mermaid connotes. The capturing of immortality would sum up not only an achievement, but also the means to it. Shakespeare began, in the words of Thorpe, in that enigmatic dedication to the sonnet, a living poet, by catching in the language of life and death the thrill of some depth of being, whereby the immortal patterns of things, where knowledge is the perceiver's consciousness directly penetrating the perceived, the inward interchange of a manifold oneness, and where, to adapt slightly a pregnant phrase of Sri Aurobindo's, sight is a flamethrower from identity. I repeat, sight is a flamethrower from identity. Probably Sri Aurobindo himself would have looked askance at this indulgence of ours in ingenuity. He was a spiritual realist and would have insisted that even his own words should be taken for what they were meant to be. In Shakespearean exegesis, he would also refrain from imaginative adventures that make out Shakespeare to be a philosopher all through, and his last play is a poetic allegory of some mystical experience. Sri Aurobindo sees all the subtle forces at work within or behind Shakespeare, but he does not lose sight of the man through whose transcribing mind the divine afflatus found its way to our earthly air. We will be studying more interesting aspects of this book by K D Sethna, who is also known to the Aurobindonian circles as Amal Kiran. Sri Aurobindo on Shakespeare. See you till next time.